She grew up in a small town where life moved slowly, and people were close to one another. In her home, she always felt a little different, a little apart, because she was drawn to things others did not pay much attention to. While other children played outside, she spent her afternoons watching her fingers move over the piano keys in the corner of her living room. It was an old piano, slightly worn out with chipped edges and keys that sometimes stuck. But to her it was magical. Every note she pressed felt like a story, a conversation with the world that no one else could hear. From a very young age, she discovered a love for music that went beyond simple enjoyment. It was like a language she could speak without words. Sometimes when she was happy, she played light, dancing tunes that made her heart feel like it was flying. Other times, when she was sad or frustrated, her music became slow and deep, heavy with emotion. She didn't know then that this connection to the piano would become the most important part of her life. She didn't take lessons at first. She learned by listening, by copying songs she loved, by feeling the rhythm in her heart. Her family noticed her dedication. At first, they were encouraging, clapping when she played a song that sounded right and smiling when her little fingers finally managed to hit a difficult note. But soon some started to worry. They didn't see the same potential she felt inside. They thought it was just a hobby, a passing interest. Friends at school teased her because she spent so much time at home with the piano instead of playing games or joining other kids in sports. Some would even say things like, "Why do you waste your time on that old thing?" Or, "You'll never be good enough to do anything with it." At first she felt hurt and embarrassed, but deep down she refused to stop. She couldn't. Even though the piano was old and out of tune, it never mattered to her. She would spend hours practicing in her room, teaching herself new songs, experimenting with rhythms, and creating little melodies of her own. Sometimes she would play so softly that it was almost like a whisper, and sometimes so loudly that it filled the house. Music became her friend, her comfort, her escape from the teasing and doubt that surrounded her. It was in those moments alone, sitting at the piano, that she felt truly alive. School was not easy. Being different often meant being lonely, and she sometimes struggled to make friends. When other children invited her to join in activities, she would decline, choosing instead to stay home and practice. It wasn't that she didn't want friends, but the piano was a part of her she could not leave behind. Some kids called her names, saying she was strange or obsessed, and it made her cheeks burn with shame. But she also began to learn something important. The laughter of others did not define her. Her heart knew what it wanted, and she could not let their words take that away. Her teachers noticed her dedication, but many were unsure how to guide her. Music classes were brief and never enough, and she often felt frustrated because she couldn't learn as much as she wanted in that small setting. Still, she persisted. She would practice scales and songs late into the evening, sometimes with her parents listening, sometimes alone. There were moments when she felt like giving up, especially after a long day when the teasing felt too heavy, or when she struggled with a particularly difficult piece. But something inside her kept going. She believed that one day all her effort would be worth it. She began to dream of performing one day, imagining herself in front of an audience, sharing the music that had lived inside her for so long. At first, this dream felt impossible. The thought of others laughing or judging her was frightening. But the more she played, the more she realized that the piano was not just a hobby or a pastime. It was a calling. It was her way to express feelings she could not speak aloud, her way to tell her story without words. Each note she played was a step closer to the person she wanted to become. Her neighbors sometimes peeked through the windows, curious about the little girl who spent so much time with the piano. Some would nod with approval, some would shrug, and others would whisper, questioning why she dedicated so much time to something they could not understand. Yet she paid little attention. She knew the piano was her home, her safe space, and every hour spent playing made her stronger and more determined. There were nights when she played under the soft glow of a lamp, the world around her quiet and still. Her fingers would glide over the keys, and she felt connected to something bigger than herself. Music gave her courage. It gave her hope. Even when the day had been hard, even when words from others had hurt, she would sit at the piano and feel a calm settle over her, a sense that she belonged to this world of melody and rhythm, a world where she was never alone. Her dedication did not go unnoticed forever. Slowly, people began to see glimpses of her talent. Some classmates stopped laughing. Others began to watch quietly, perhaps realizing that there was more to her than they had thought. But it was not the recognition from others that mattered most. It was the joy she found in her own progress, the satisfaction of hitting a note just right, the thrill of learning a new piece, and the quiet pride that grew inside her with every practice session. Music was not just a skill. It became a part of who she was. It shaped her character, teaching her patience, discipline, and resilience. It taught her that hard work, even when unseen or unappreciated, was always valuable. And as she continued to play, her love for the piano grew deeper, becoming inseparable from her own sense of identity. She was no longer just a girl who practiced in secret. She was a musician in the making, a dreamer with a purpose, a soul who had found a voice that no ridicule could ever silence. The small town that once laughed at her dedication would, in time, hear her story, but for now it was enough that she believed in herself. Every evening as she sat at the old piano, her fingers dancing over the keys, she imagined the possibilities that lay ahead. She imagined the day when her music would not just be heard by herself, but by others who would feel the emotions she poured into every note. And in those quiet, golden hours of practice, she began to understand that the journey she was on was more important than any moment of recognition. The piano had become her companion, her teacher, and her mirror. Through it, she learned that courage comes not from applause, but from the simple act of continuing, even when the world does not yet see your light. The first time she played in front of others was a moment she would never forget. It was a small gathering at her school, a talent show where children were encouraged to share what they loved. She had practiced for weeks, determined to show what she could do, and for the first time she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness that made her heart pound. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with her small frame, feeling the weight of the audience's eyes on her. She sat down at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. At first, the notes were hesitant, as if her hands were unsure of their own courage. The melody stumbled, and she could hear whispers and a few giggles from the crowd. Her face turned red with embarrassment. Some children snickered openly, and she felt a sharp sting in her chest. The laughter seemed louder than the music itself, and for a moment, she thought she should stop. That maybe they were right, that perhaps she was foolish to dream so big. But then a quiet thought whispered inside her. If she stopped now, the music would die before it had a chance to speak. And she couldn't let that happen. She took a deep breath, held it, and tried again. With every note, she grew a little braver. Her hands remembered the hours of practice, the countless evenings spent learning scales, and the melodies she had created in secret. Slowly, the music became smoother, flowing from her fingers with more confidence and emotion. Though there were still whispers and doubtful faces, she began to notice a few people leaning forward, their eyes widening, their attention caught by the beauty in her playing. The piano became her shield and her voice at the same time, and she felt a strength she had never known before. After the performance, she left the stage with a mixture of relief and pride. Some children laughed quietly behind her back, but others clapped politely, and a few even offered shy compliments. For the first time, she realized that not everyone would see her in the same way, and that was okay. What mattered most was that she had faced her fear and kept playing. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to continue despite it. The teasing at school did not end overnight. In fact, some children continued to make fun of her, saying she would never be good enough, that she should give up and do something more practical with her time. These words hurt deeply, and there were nights when she lay awake wondering if they might be right. But every time she sat at her piano, the familiar feel of the keys beneath her fingers reminded her that this was where she belonged. The music did not judge her, it did not ridicule her. It simply existed, and she was part of it. And slowly, the hurt from the words of others began to fade in the face of her own growing confidence. At home, she continued to practice tirelessly. She experimented with different styles, tried to learn songs that seemed impossible, and even began to write small compositions of her own. The more she played, the more she realized that her music was not just about notes or technique. It was about expressing what she felt inside. When words failed her, the piano spoke. When her heart was heavy with doubt or sadness, her fingers could pour those emotions into melodies that were both beautiful and cathartic. Music became her way of understanding herself, and it gave her a sense of purpose she had never known before. One day, while she was practicing in her room, a teacher from her school happened to hear her playing. He paused in the doorway, struck by the depth and feeling in her music. He listened quietly, not wanting to disturb her, and when she finished, he gently knocked on the door. She looked up surprised, and he smiled. He told her that her playing had a natural beauty and emotional power that could not be taught, and he asked if she would like guidance and lessons. It was the first time anyone had recognized her talent in such a serious way. She felt a surge of hope and excitement, realizing that perhaps her dream of becoming truly skilled was possible. With the teacher's guidance, she began to improve more quickly. He showed her techniques she had never learned on her own, and encouraged her to explore her emotions through her playing. She discovered new ways to make the piano sing, to tell stories without speaking a single word. Each lesson left her more inspired and more determined to practice. Slowly, the ridicule from others became less important. She knew she was on a path that mattered, and the opinion of those who could not understand her journey could not shake her. Still, facing others in public remained challenging. There were performances at school assemblies and small local events, and each time, nerves threatened to take over. She remembered the laughter from her first performance and felt the familiar pang of fear. But with each new experience, she grew stronger. She learned to focus not on the audience but on the music, on the story she wanted to tell with every note. And with each performance, she noticed small changes: the quiet attention of some classmates, the respectful nods of teachers, the occasional applause that warmed her heart. Each moment of recognition, no matter how small, reinforced her belief that she was on the right path. Her friends at school began to see her differently too. Some who had once teased her grew curious about the music she played. They would stop by to listen, sometimes asking questions about what she was playing or how she learned it. It was not easy to forget the past laughter, but she began to realize that people could change and that she could inspire others simply by staying true to herself. She also found comfort in those who supported her, even if they were few. Their encouragement reminded her that she was not alone in her love for music. Despite progress, there were still challenges at home. The piano was old and required maintenance that her family sometimes could not afford. Some days a key would stick or a note would sound off, frustrating her deeply. But rather than giving up, she learned to adapt. She practiced patience and problem-solving, finding ways to work around the limitations of the instrument. This taught her resilience and the value of perseverance. She realized that life, much like music, was full of imperfections, and learning to work with them could create something beautiful in itself. Through all of this, her passion for the piano never waned. She began to dream bigger, imagining herself performing not just at school but at larger events, perhaps even on stages she had only seen in pictures. Each day of practice was a step toward that dream, and each moment of doubt or ridicule became a lesson in strength. She understood that success would not come overnight, but that the journey itself was shaping her into someone capable of achieving it. The piano became more than just an instrument. It became a part of her identity. It was her refuge in times of sadness, her companion in moments of solitude, and her voice when words failed. She discovered that the more she embraced her passion, the less the opinions of others mattered. The ridicule that had once felt unbearable now seemed distant, almost irrelevant. She was learning that the most important judgment came from within, and that self-belief could be stronger than any outside criticism. Her dedication began to inspire small changes in her community. Neighbors who once doubted her commitment started to notice her growth. Teachers who had overlooked her potential began to offer more guidance and support. Even some classmates who had teased her showed signs of admiration, though quietly at first. It was not a sudden transformation, but a gradual shift that reflected the power of persistence and determination. As she continued her journey, she understood that the path of a musician was not just about talent or technique. It was about resilience, courage, and the willingness to continue in the face of doubt. Each performance, each practice session, each note played with intention was a step toward becoming the musician she dreamed of being. She realized that the laughter of others could no longer define her worth, because she had found something much more important: a love for music that was unshakable, a commitment to herself that could not be broken, and a belief in her own potential that would carry her through any challenge. The turning point in her journey came unexpectedly, like a gentle breeze that changes the course of a river. One afternoon, while she was practicing in her room, her teacher suggested she try something new. He had noticed not just her technical ability, but also the emotion she could convey with her playing. He encouraged her to explore her feelings and to allow the piano to become a mirror for her thoughts and experiences. This advice felt different from anything she had heard before, and it opened a door she hadn't realized was there. She began experimenting more boldly. Instead of simply repeating songs she had learned, she tried creating her own melodies, improvising as her fingers moved over the keys. At first, the notes felt uncertain, like she was stepping into a world with no map, but gradually she found her voice in the music, a way to tell her story without words. Each piece she created reflected her life, her struggles, and her dreams. The piano became not just a tool, but a partner in expressing herself, and the bond grew stronger with every day of practice. Her skills improved rapidly under the guidance of her teacher. He introduced her to new techniques, complex pieces, and ways to bring emotion into each note. He helped her understand that music was not just about playing the correct keys, but about conveying feeling and connecting with the listener. This was a revelation to her, and she spent countless hours exploring this new dimension of playing. The more she practiced, the more confident she became in her ability to touch the hearts of those who listened. With this newfound confidence, she began to participate in more public performances. Unlike her first experience, where fear and ridicule had dominated, she now approached the stage with a quiet determination. She focused on the music and on the story she wanted to tell, rather than the judgment of others. With each performance, she noticed a shift in the audience's reactions. The laughter that had once greeted her playing was replaced by attentive listening, polite applause, and even admiration. Each positive response reinforced her belief that she was on the right path. Despite her progress, challenges remained. There were still moments of doubt, nights when she struggled with difficult pieces or days when the old piano seemed to fight against her. Some classmates continued to whisper and tease, and she had to remind herself constantly that their opinions did not define her worth. These obstacles, however, became lessons in patience and resilience. She learned that mastery was not instant, that every mistake was part of the journey, and that persistence was more important than perfection. Her teacher continued to be a source of inspiration. He shared stories of great musicians who had faced criticism, doubt, and failure, yet persevered to achieve greatness. These stories resonated deeply with her, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, courage, and belief in oneself were equally vital. She began to see herself not just as a student, but as a musician in the making, someone capable of touching hearts with her music if she remained committed and brave. At home, she became more intentional with her practice. She organized her time, dedicating hours each day to both technical exercises and creative exploration. She experimented with different styles, from classical to contemporary, learning to adapt her playing to convey different emotions. Her compositions began to take shape, each one telling a story that reflected her journey, her struggles, and her victories. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was a reflection of her soul. The turning point also came in how she viewed herself. She began to understand that her worth was not measured by the approval of others, but by her dedication, effort, and love for music. She realized that those who mocked her in the past had no power over her future, and that every hour spent practicing brought her closer to her dreams. This internal shift transformed not only her playing but her confidence, resilience, and outlook on life. Encouraged by her teacher, she entered a regional music competition. This was a step far beyond anything she had attempted before, and the nerves returned in full force. But she focused on the music, on the story she wanted to tell, and on the countless hours of preparation that had led her to this moment. When she performed, her fingers moved with precision and emotion, her melodies flowing effortlessly, touching the hearts of everyone in the audience. The reaction was overwhelming. People who had doubted her were silent, absorbed in the beauty of her playing. Applause erupted at the end, not polite but genuine, filled with admiration and awe. This experience marked a new chapter in her life. She realized that ridicule and doubt were not obstacles to stop her, but tests to overcome. Each challenge had strengthened her, and each moment of practice had prepared her for the triumphs ahead. She felt a sense of purpose that went beyond personal achievement. She understood that her music could inspire and touch others, just as it had been her solace during lonely and difficult times. She began to teach herself to perform with intention, considering not just the notes but the experience of the audience. She practiced dynamics, timing, and expression, learning how to lead listeners through the story within her music. Her confidence grew, and with it her ability to handle any skepticism or doubt from others. The more she played, the more she realized that her journey was not just about technical skill, but about connecting with people, sharing a piece of herself through the piano. At school, her reputation began to shift. Those who had once laughed at her dedication began to admire her determination and talent. Some classmates approached her for advice or simply to listen, and even the teachers who had been skeptical became more supportive. This recognition, however, was secondary to the satisfaction she felt within herself. She had learned the most important lesson. Belief in oneself could overcome fear, doubt, and ridicule. Her compositions became more complex and expressive. She would spend hours exploring different melodies, harmonies, and rhythms, experimenting until she found the exact sound that matched her emotions. She wrote pieces that were happy and light, others that were deep and melancholic, and still others that told stories of hope and courage. Each new creation brought her a sense of accomplishment and joy that no external approval could match. Music also began to influence other aspects of her life. She developed greater patience, discipline, and resilience. She learned to set goals, work steadily toward them, and embrace mistakes as opportunities to grow. She discovered a sense of empathy, understanding that music had the power to connect with others and express emotions that words often could not. This understanding made her not only a better musician, but a more thoughtful and compassionate person. Through this turning point, she also began to appreciate the journey itself, not just the end result. She understood that every mistake, every moment of doubt, every long hour of practice had shaped her into the musician she was becoming. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a mirror of her soul. Every note she played reflected her growth, her courage, and her dedication. By the time she returned home from the competition, she felt a quiet pride that was unlike anything she had experienced before. She had faced her fears, overcome ridicule, and discovered the true power of her music. She realized that the piano was not just a tool for playing songs. It was a means of self-expression, a source of strength, and a way to connect with the world. The turning point had not come from recognition or applause, but from within, from the courage to continue and the willingness to believe in herself. As she continued to practice and perform, she carried this lesson with her. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt, and perhaps even criticism from those who did not understand her passion. But she also knew that she had discovered a strength that could not be taken away, a connection to her music that was unbreakable. The turning point had taught her that success was not measured by the approval of others, but by the courage to pursue one's dreams and the joy of embracing one's passion fully. The day of the big performance arrived, and she felt a nervous excitement that was both thrilling and terrifying. It was a local music competition, and the audience included not only her schoolmates and teachers but also members of the community, people whose opinions mattered more than any she had encountered before. As she prepared to go on stage, her heart raced and 1,000 thoughts ran through her mind. She remembered the laughter and teasing from the past, the moments of doubt, and the countless hours of practice that had led her to this day. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had worked hard, that her music had power, and that this was her chance to show what she could do. When she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights and the sea of faces were overwhelming. She walked confidently to the piano, letting her fingers hover over the keys for a moment, feeling their familiar texture and weight. The room was silent, waiting for her first note, and she felt a surge of determination. She began to play, and immediately the music carried her away. Every note was filled with emotion. Every melody told a story, and the audience was drawn in. She played not for approval, not for recognition, but for the music itself, letting it flow through her fingers and into the hearts of those who listened. At first, there were a few murmurs, whispers of doubt from people who had not expected much, but as she continued, those murmurs faded. The power of the music was undeniable. It filled the room with beauty, with passion, and with a sense of honesty that touched everyone present. Her fingers moved with precision and confidence, yet each note carried feeling, a message of resilience and hope. The music was not just sound. It was her story, her journey, her courage transformed into melody. As she played, she noticed the audience leaning forward, their eyes focused, their expressions changing. Some faces reflected surprise, others admiration, and some even had tears glistening in their eyes. The laughter and mockery she had feared were gone, replaced by a deep respect for the talent and emotion she was conveying. For the first time, she realized that her music had the power to silence doubt, to inspire, and to create a connection between her and others that words could never achieve. The piece she performed was one she had composed herself, inspired by her journey through ridicule, practice, and self-discovery. It began softly with gentle, tentative notes representing the early days when she had been unsure and vulnerable. Then, the melody grew bolder, more confident, echoing the hours of practice and the lessons she had learned. Finally, it reached a powerful, triumphant crescendo, a musical declaration of her perseverance and belief in herself. The audience was captivated, swept along by the story she was telling through her fingers. When the last note faded into silence, there was a moment of stillness, a breath held collectively by everyone in the room. Then applause erupted, loud and genuine, echoing through the hall. Some people stood clapping enthusiastically, others wiped away tears, and a few whispered to each other in awe. She sat there for a moment, letting the sound of the audience's reaction wash over her, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. In that moment, she knew that she had achieved something far greater than winning a competition. She had touched hearts, including her own, in a way that no ridicule or doubt could ever undo. After the performance, people approached her to compliment her, to ask about her techniques, to express how moved they had been. Teachers, neighbors, and even former classmates who had once laughed at her dedication now looked at her with admiration. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not because of the recognition, but because she had stayed true to herself, persevered through challenges, and allowed her passion to shine. She realized that this moment was the result of years of dedication, resilience, and belief in her own abilities. The experience also changed the way she viewed herself. She understood that the obstacles she had faced, the teasing, the doubts, the failures, were all part of her growth. Each challenge had taught her something valuable, and each moment of perseverance had built her strength and confidence. She realized that success was not defined by the opinions of others, but by the courage to continue pursuing one's passion, by the ability to transform fear and doubt into determination and expression. Her performance became a turning point, not only in her journey as a musician, but in her life as a whole. She began to see opportunities she had never imagined, invitations to perform at larger events, and chances to share her music with a wider audience. The piano, which had once been a source of solitude and private joy, now became a bridge to the world, a way to connect with people and inspire them with the same hope and courage that had carried her through difficult times. The lessons she learned from this triumph extended beyond music. She understood the importance of persistence, of believing in oneself even when others do not, and of finding strength in passion and dedication. She learned that true confidence comes from preparation and self-belief, not from the absence of fear. And most importantly, she realized that her journey, with all its struggles and triumphs, had shaped her into a person capable of achieving more than she had ever dreamed. After the competition, she continued to practice and perform, each experience building on the last. She explored new pieces, experimented with compositions, and continued to develop her own style and expression. She also began to mentor younger students, sharing her story and encouraging them to pursue their passions no matter the obstacles. She wanted others to understand that ridicule and doubt were temporary, but the joy and fulfillment of following one's heart could last a lifetime. The community that had once doubted her slowly began to recognize her dedication and talent. Parents, teachers, and neighbors spoke of her achievements, sharing her story with others, and inspiring children and adults alike. She became a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that hard work, courage, and belief in oneself could overcome even the harshest judgment. Yet she remained humble, always focusing on the music, on the joy it brought her, and on the message she wanted to share with the world. Through this moment of triumph, she discovered the true power of music. It was more than an instrument or a skill. It was a voice, a tool for expression, and a means of connection. She learned that every note played with sincerity could touch hearts, that every melody carried emotion and meaning, and that music had the power to transform not only the listener, but also the musician. Her journey had taught her that the most profound victories were not about trophies or accolades, but about self-discovery, courage, and the ability to inspire others. In the days and weeks that followed, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the moments of doubt, the times when she had considered giving up, and the laughter that had once seemed so overwhelming. She realized that each of those experiences had been necessary, shaping her resilience and determination. The ridicule that had once seemed insurmountable now felt like a distant memory, a stepping stone that had led her to this moment of triumph. She understood that success was not a single event but a journey, and that every challenge along the way had contributed to her growth and achievement. Her triumph was not the end, but a new beginning. She continued to perform, to create, and to share her music, each day building on the lessons she had learned. She understood that the journey of a musician was lifelong, filled with challenges, opportunities, and moments of self-discovery. And through it all, she carried the knowledge that courage, dedication, and belief in oneself could overcome any obstacle, silence any ridicule, and transform even the simplest notes into something extraordinary. After her remarkable performance, life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Word of her talent spread throughout the community, and invitations to perform at larger events started arriving. People who had once laughed at her dedication now watched in admiration, curious to hear the music that had captured the hearts of so many. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness with every new opportunity, but she also felt ready. Each performance, each practice session, had prepared her for this moment, and she embraced it with quiet confidence. She continued to practice diligently, exploring new pieces and experimenting with her own compositions. Her music became richer, more nuanced as she learned to express a wider range of emotions. She understood that every note she played could tell a story, communicate a feeling, or inspire someone listening. This awareness made her performances more meaningful, and audiences began to notice the depth and emotion she brought to each piece. Her dedication and talent became a source of inspiration, showing others that persistence and passion could overcome any obstacle. As her reputation grew, she began to receive letters and messages from young people who had heard her story. They shared their own struggles with ridicule, doubt, or fear of pursuing their passions. She realized that her journey could be a beacon of hope for others, and she felt a responsibility to share not only her music, but also the lessons she had learned along the way. She began visiting schools, community centers, and small gatherings, performing and talking about her experiences. She wanted to show that following one's heart and believing in oneself could lead to extraordinary things. Her family watched her journey with pride. They remembered the days when she practiced quietly at home, when her fingers stumbled over the keys and her confidence wavered. Now they saw the transformation, the young woman who had faced ridicule and fear, who had worked tirelessly to improve, and who now shared her gift with the world. They were inspired not only by her music but also by her courage and resilience. Her success had brought a sense of hope and pride to everyone around her. Even as recognition and opportunities grew, she remained humble. She never forgot the early days of doubt and ridicule, and she continued to value the quiet moments of practice and personal growth. She understood that her journey was not about fame or applause, but about connecting with people, sharing her music, and inspiring others. Each performance was a chance to touch hearts, and she approached every stage with gratitude and respect for the gift she had been given. She also began mentoring young musicians, teaching them not just technical skills but also the importance of perseverance, self-belief, and emotional expression. She shared her own story, the hours of practice, the mistakes, the moments of doubt, and the ultimate triumph. Her students were inspired by her journey, and many began to approach their own challenges with renewed determination. She realized that the impact of her music extended far beyond the notes she played. It had the power to shape lives, instill confidence, and inspire courage. The local community that had once doubted her slowly became her greatest supporters. Parents, teachers, and neighbors spoke proudly of her achievements, and her story was shared as an example of what dedication and passion could accomplish. Children who had once seen her as an odd or obsessive student now looked up to her as a role model. She had transformed the perception of herself from someone who was ridiculed into someone who inspired and led by example. Despite the recognition and admiration, she never allowed herself to become complacent. She continued to set goals, explore new challenges, and refine her skills. She understood that growth was a lifelong process, and that every performance, every composition, and every lesson learned was an opportunity to improve. Her journey had taught her that success was not a final destination, but a continuous path of learning, discovery, and expression. Her music began to take on new dimensions as she incorporated different styles and explored deeper emotional ranges. She experimented with harmonies, rhythms, and techniques that challenged her abilities and expanded her creativity. Each new piece was a reflection of her evolving understanding of music and life, a testament to the countless hours of dedication and the unwavering belief she had in herself. Her performances were no longer just displays of technical skill. They were immersive experiences that moved audiences and conveyed the essence of her journey. Through it all, she remained aware of the lessons learned from ridicule and doubt. She remembered the early days when laughter had felt like a barrier she could not overcome, and she understood how far she had come. These memories became a source of strength and motivation, reminding her that perseverance, passion, and self-belief were more powerful than any criticism. She shared these lessons openly, encouraging others to embrace their own challenges and to continue pursuing their dreams despite obstacles. Her influence extended beyond music. She inspired people to approach life with courage, resilience, and dedication. Her story became a reminder that passion and perseverance could transform even the most difficult circumstances into opportunities for growth and success. Young and old alike looked to her as an example of what was possible when one remained committed to a dream and refused to be deterred by fear or ridicule. She also learned to cherish the personal moments that fueled her creativity. Quiet evenings at the piano, the thrill of discovering a new melody, the joy of completing a challenging piece. These experiences became her sanctuary and her source of inspiration. They reminded her that the journey was as meaningful as the destination, and that the love for her craft was what truly mattered. Every note she played was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her unwavering belief in herself. Her story continued to reach wider audiences. News of her talent and perseverance spread to other towns, and invitations to perform at regional and national events arrived. Each new stage was an opportunity to share her music, to inspire others, and to continue growing as an artist. She approached each performance with humility and dedication, understanding that her gift was not only a personal achievement, but also a responsibility to share, to connect, and to inspire. Over time, she came to see that her journey was about more than music. It was about courage, resilience, and the power of self-belief. It was about transforming doubt and ridicule into strength and inspiration. It was about showing others that following one's passion, no matter the obstacles, could lead to extraordinary accomplishments. Her music had become a vehicle for hope, a way to touch lives and encourage others to pursue their dreams. Looking back, she realized how far she had come from the days when she practiced alone in her room, uncertain of her abilities and fearful of ridicule. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every hour of practice had contributed to her growth. She had learned the value of perseverance, the importance of self-belief, and the transformative power of passion. She had discovered that true success is measured not by applause or recognition alone, but by the courage to pursue one's dreams and the ability to inspire others along the way.